Okay, so if you have 15x to the third, you can make that 3 times 5 times x squared minus 2 times 5 times x squared plus 6x, you can make that 2 times 3 times x minus 2 times 2. Okay, so all you did was just break down each term. Okay. Now for these two terms, you have a 5 in common, and you have an x squared in common. Okay, so the only thing left is 3 times x minus 2, since that's the only thing left. Okay, here you have a 2 in common. So the only thing you have left is 3 times x minus 2. Okay, so that makes sense. All right. Okay, so now, remember before when I said on step 3, if the greatest common factor is a binomial, factor it out? This is the case where that common factor is a binomial. You have this, and you have this. It's exactly the same. So the same way you would factor it out if it were an A, you factor it out as a binomial. Okay, so since you have 3x minus 2, make sure that's up far enough, and you factored it out, just like before, once you factor it out, you cross it out. So you just go ahead and cross those two out, and what's left goes inside the other parentheses. So you have 5x squared plus 2. And if you actually do the FOIL method to solve that one, you'll see it comes right out to where you started. Okay, so this is your factoring by grouping. All right, so any questions on that one? Okay, so let's do another example. Oh, make sure everyone done writing. All right. Okay, so let's say, for example, we wanted to factor by grouping. Uh, 3x squared plus 4xy minus 3x minus 4y. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so if you remember your first step, you're going to break those down into two smaller groups. So 3x squared plus 4xy minus 3x minus 4y. I'm going to break that down to two smaller groups. Okay. And you want to be really careful when that middle term, not middle term, but that middle sign is a minus. Excuse me. So if middle sign is minus, be careful. Only because it's really easy. Once you factor out a negative, it's really easy to forget that one. But you can always double check it by distributing. But I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay. Now remember your second step. You want to find the greatest common factor for both of those. Okay, so you have 3 times x plus 4 times x times y minus 3 times x minus 4 times y. Okay, so in this one, you have an x in common. And really, that's it. So you just bring the x out to the front. So you have a 3x left here, and that goes in this parentheses. And you have a 4y, or plus 4y, right there. Okay. Now if you notice, these two terms, they don't have anything in common. Now normally, when you don't have anything in common, your greatest common factor is a 1. But in this case, you have a negative here and a negative here. So you can actually factor out a negative 1. Okay, so if you factored out a negative 1 here, and that leaves you, if you remove the negative 1, that just makes that positive 3x. And if you remove the negative 1 here, that makes that positive 4y. Okay, you always can double check if you distribute that negative 1, it should give you exactly what you have here, so you know you're on the right track. Okay, and just like before, our third step, we have our matching binomials. Okay, so all you have to do is get those binomials, factor them out to the front. And once you do that, just like before, you cross them out once you factor them out, and everything that's left goes into the other parentheses. So you have x, and you have negative 1, or minus 1. Okay, so if you do the FOIL method on that, you'll end up right back where you started. Okay, so any questions on that one? All right. All right. Make sure everyone get them. Okay. Okay, so let's say we wanted to factor by grouping. Let me pick a good one here. Say 3xy plus 2 minus 3x minus 2y. Okay, so if you remember the first step, you have 3xy plus 2 minus 3x minus 2y, but you're going to break that down to two separate groups. Okay, but if you notice here, you don't have anything in common that you can factor out. Here you can factor out a negative 1, but this doesn't really help you here. Okay, so you can now just rearrange them a little bit. You can bring that 3x next to that 3x. That 2 next to that 2. So as long as the sign in front is the same, you can switch them around all you like. So we rearrange. Okay. So you have 3xy. Just make that minus 3x. Plus 2 minus 2y, or you can put minus 2y plus 2. Wouldn't hurt either way. Actually, I think I will do it that way. So we'll use this one. Okay. So now we just start our first step over again. So start your steps over. Okay. So that means your first step is now you're working with this one. You have 3xy minus 3x minus 2y plus 2. Okay. So we just break that down to two smaller groups. Okay. So now this first group, we can have 3 times x times y minus 3 times x minus 2 times y, and that's just plus 2, or you can put 2 times 1 if you want to. You don't really have to. Okay. So for this one, you can factor out an x and a 3 from both of those. And that leaves you with y minus, and as soon as you factor out everything there, remember, you just put a 1 in its place. And if you want to double check it, just distribute it, and you should end up right back where you started. Okay. Now with this one, and this is why you want to be careful, mostly because of the minus in the middle. If you factor out a negative 1, from both of these terms, if you factor out a negative 1 here, that makes that positive 2y. But if you factor out a negative 1 there, that's like saying a negative 1 times negative 1 times 2, because the two negative 1s will become positive. So if you factored out a negative 1 here, that actually will become, minus 2. Sorry about that. So that should be y minus 1. And the reason you want to be careful with that minus sign is because it's really easy to make that a plus again. But you can always double check it by distributing negative 2 times y is negative 2y, negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Okay. So that's why that middle term, you want to be careful with it. It's really easy to get tripped up by that one. Okay. So you have y minus 1 and y minus 1. Once again, as soon as they're the same, just factor it out. And everything that's left goes into the next parentheses. So you have 3x minus 2. Okay, so that would be your factor. All right. Any questions on that one? Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll make sure everyone's done. Okay, so we're going to do one more example, and this is just an example of what happens when you can rearrange all day long and still won't help. Okay. All right, so let's say, for example, I'm going to factor by grouping. Five x minus 10 plus x to the third minus x squared. Okay, so remember your first step. 5x minus 10 plus x to the third minus x squared. Just going to break that down into two smaller groups. So this one, you can make that 5 times x minus 5 times 2. Okay, so plus, you have an x squared there, which means you can make this x times x squared minus x squared. Okay, so here you can factor a 5 out of both of those, and that leaves you with x minus 2. For this one, you can factor an x squared out of both of those, which leaves you with x minus 1. Okay. Now the reason this doesn't work is that if these two are not the same, you can't factor it out. Okay, so that means we're going to have to rearrange it and try again. Okay, so let's say you have 5x minus x squared plus x to the third minus 10. Okay, so you just kind of switch them up a little bit. Okay, so if we broke those down, we could factor an x out of these two, which will leave you with 5 minus x. But these two don't have anything in common, except 1. That's the only number they both have in common. Okay, and you can keep rearranging all day long and nothing will ever work out. So this is the one case where you can't factor this one out. So it is a prime polynomial. Okay. And either prime polynomial or prime will be your answer. Most of the time they'll tell you if it can't be factored, write prime or something like that. Okay. So any questions on that one? All right. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
All the notes that you wrote, you post them on Canvas, right?
Yes. Yeah. So each class you'll see right up underneath the homework, it'll say like class 1 notes, class 2 notes. They'll be right there. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, anyone still writing? Nope. Okay. So now we're going to review factoring trinomials. In the form x squared plus bx plus c. Okay. So all that means is there's nothing in front of the x squared. And b and c are just numbers. Now, in order to find the factor for a trinomial, you can use these steps. It's pretty, as long as you have a pretty clear understanding of your multiplication, these steps are not too horrible. Okay, so to find this type of trinomial, first, you want to identify your B and C value. Okay. And I'll show you all of these in the steps. Second, you want to find two numbers that multiply to equal whatever your C value is and add to equal whatever your B is. Okay. And really steps 1 or 2 and 2, the way at least the way I do them, it takes up very little space and it's pretty quick. So the only thing that would really hold you up is if you're rusty on your multiplication. So if you are, you may want to go back and kind of brush up a little bit. Okay. So once you find those two values, or not even replace, place the values from step 2 in the form x. It's going to be either plus or minus. It kind of depends on what values you have up here. Some unknown number times x plus or minus some number there. So we don't know what those values are, but those are the values that will be in step 2. Okay. So if you have 3 and 4 in step 2, then that will be x plus 3, x plus 4. If you have 3 and negative 1, that will be x plus 3, x minus 1. So if it's a negative, it'll be a minus sign. If it's positive, it'll be a plus sign. All right, so let's say, for example, if you wanted to factor x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay. So what I do is I usually do all 3 steps kind of in one motion. So x squared plus 7x plus 12, right underneath it, always write, you want to find two numbers that multiply to equal your 12. So we know that your C is equal to 12 and your B is equal to 7. So you want to find two numbers that multiply to equal your C, where in this case is 12. And those same two numbers, you want them to add to equal your B, which is 7. Okay. Who has any ideas?
4 and 3.
Yep, 4 times 3. Okay, so if you have 4 times 3, do I have a different color? I think that's blue. Oops, same color. So 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is 7. So all you'd have to do is write your parentheses, plus 4, positive 3. So it's going to be plus 4, plus 3. So this is just factored to become that. And if you use the FOIL method, you can always double check it. Okay. So here, this is just step 1, identifying your B and C. But step 2 and 3 is just done in one motion. All right. Any questions on that one? All right. He's done. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to factor, let me pick a good one. X squared minus 12x plus 35. Okay. Now in this case, we know that C is equal to 35, but B is equal to negative 12. So whenever you have that minus, that's going to be a negative number. Okay. So if you have x squared minus 12x plus 35, you're going to find two numbers that multiply to equal your C, and those same two numbers add to equal your B. Okay. Okay. Who has any ideas?
-7.
Yep, -7 and -5. So -7 plus -5 is -12, and -7 times -5 is positive 35. Okay, so sometimes you have to kind of, play around with positive and negative numbers here and there. Okay, so all you have to do, get those values, -7, so that'll be x minus 7, -5, x minus 5. Any questions on that one? All right. Let's pick a good one here. Okay, so let's say, for example, in some cases, you will have to factor out a greatest common factor before you can factor it out. Okay, so let's say if you wanted to factor, let's pick a good one. Say 3x squared minus 24x minus 60. Okay. Now you have something in front of the x squared, so you don't want something in front of the x squared. I mean, we have a method coming up for when you have a value in front of the x squared, but it's a lot longer. But you want to use this method because it's short, it's to the point, you don't have to worry about a whole lot. So we want to factor a 3 out of each of those terms. Okay, so if you have 3 times x squared, 24, you can make that 3 times 8. And 60, you can make that 3 times 20. Okay, so if you factor a 3 out of each of those, and cross those out once you do, you have x squared minus 8x minus 20.